Hey guys, and welcome to another video here. Now, if you looked at the thumbnail, which I'm assuming you did, you'll know this video is about a particular video card. Now, again, I want to make this clear right from the start. People that frequent this channel and have seen a lot of my videos probably know by now, but if you're new to the channel and you just stumbled across this video, I generally don't take a card and look at it how do I put this? On its own. That is, I don't take a certain video card and I don't put it in a really powerful, more modern system. I don't get rid of bottlenecks and see the maximum performance of, say, a card or a CPU or something like that. Usually what I'll do, what I like to do, is I take it and I put it in a system that's mostly error correct, and I like to see how it performed in an error correct machine. So that's what we're going to do for the card that we're going to talk about in this video. Maybe, depending on how things go at the end, I may actually do a couple tests by putting the card in a newer, more powerful machine and maybe seeing what kind of max performance we can get out of the card just for fun. But for the most part, this video is going to be about a period correct setup, and that is why we're looking at this machine. Now, I did a quick video actually on the motherboard in this case a little while ago, so I will go over it again really quick. I thought this would be a good PC to use the card in question, which I will talk about obviously pretty soon. So why do I have this machine here? Well, this is the host machine that we're going to use for our graphics card, which I will talk about presently. Now, this machine may look familiar to you guys. I did quickly go over it in a video a little bit back. Inside here is a pretty early socket 7 board, and I felt this machine would be a great host for our graphics card we're going to look at. This is pretty period correct, even down to the CD drive I added. This is a 24 times max CD drive with a manufacturer sticker on there of 97. Pretty much every component of this machine is from 1997 or 1996. The one exception would be a USB card that I did fit into this machine just to make file transferring easier, but everything else is from the 96-97 period. And actually, this machine is actually more powerful than the machine I personally had in the late 90s. Around this time period, 97, when I got a PC, that was my own PC. It was actually an AST machine. I can't remember if it had a Pentium 166 or 133 in it, but I know it had just built-in sound. It had built-in Trident. I don't think I had any 3D capabilities, and it was just but you know, I played on a lot. I think I had 32 megabytes of RAM. I did a lot of gaming on that machine though, so I think this is a pretty good example of it, a budgety sort of build for 97, or at least kind of a common. This wouldn't be really high-end for 97, but I think it's a good representation of what an average PC would be like in 1997. And we can even put a little story together for it. Maybe it's a dad's computer, he needed it for work, and it's just the family computer, and there's a kid, and you know, they're allowed to use it and do some gaming on it. So I'm interested to see how this kind of machine that's not really a gaming machine would do in 1997, maybe even 98. So I think that would be pretty interesting. We see a lot of videos with really high-end setups, so let's take a look at a more average setup, or something that was more meant for work, doing work at home, and you know, it's dad's computer, it's mom's computer, and you got a kid, and you know, they're just doing what they can gaming on this family computer that's not really geared for gaming. So enough of me jibber-jabbering. Let's take a quick look inside, re-go over the parts really quick, and then look at the video card in question, which is really the focus of this video. Alright, so here I have the side open. We're just going to go over this real quick, because again, the focus of this video is the graphics card itself, but I just want to go over the components real quick. Right here we have the CPU. Now, technically this machine is capable of taking a 200 megahertz classic Pentium, but jumper settings don't have any settings for it. Now, usually you can play around and you can find a setting that will work, and you will get a Pentium 200 running just fine, but I couldn't find any jumper settings that would give me that speed. So I just ended up going with the fastest official speed we have, which is 166 megahertz. So we do have a Pentium 200 installed in there, but it is running it's downclocked to 166 megahertz, which is still a very respectable CPU for 1997. I believe it came out in 96. There would still be a lot of these in general use in 97. It would still be on the market. People would still be buying them. But I still think it makes a pretty good general use CPU for 1997. There's probably still a lot of these in use and being sold in slightly more budget-oriented machines. Although it would still been a pretty decent CPU, I think, I would assume, for 97. What else do we have here? We have the hard drive. I don't know what the model is off the top of my head, but it is a 1 gigabyte hard drive, and this is going to make things a little bit interesting here. I believe this drive is actually dying. Every once in a while it lets out this horrible high-pitched squealing sound, which can't be good, but we're going to live life a little bit dangerously here, and we're going to see if we can get some benchmarks and tests out of it, get some little bit more use out of it. It'll be interesting if it dies during the tests. Not a big deal, I'll just put another one in. And we are using Windows 98 SE. Not much else to talk about here before we go onto the card. This board has PCI and 16-bit ISA slots. Interestingly, in CPU-Z, it's detected as a socket 5 board, but it is socket 7. Now, the sound card we have here, this is just an AW32. This is actually the sound card that came when I got this machine. It has one of these Polywell, all the parts on this thing have Polywell system stickers with serial numbers, and the sound card also has one, which is on the underside. So I think that's about all for our quick overview of this 1997-ish system. So let's look at the graphics card in question and the card that is the focus of this video. Alright, so here we go. This is the Creative Labs model CT6610 Permedia 2. Now obviously this is based on the original Permedia card. This one has the RAM expansion. I'm not exactly sure. It might be 4 on board and 4 in this expansion for 8 total. So I think this is an 8 megabyte card, although it could be a 4 megabyte card. I'll have to confirm that when I boot it up. I don't remember at the moment. This is a PCI card. It did come in an AGP version. Now, you don't really hear about this card much because this was not a gaming card. This was kind of meant more for a professional business sort of market. Although, surprisingly, from what I read, it should be decent at gaming. It was pretty advanced for the time it came out in 1997. It did support some different features. It should have a very good image quality to it. Probably not as good as the fabled Matrix cards, but it should have a really decent visual quality to it. I believe the clock speed is around 83 megahertz, but we'll double check that once we have it in the system going. Now, the drivers I'll be using for this are just the last reference drivers. I am not using any third-party drivers, if there even are third-party drivers for it. But this should be an interesting card just to see how well this kind of card does. Now, it doesn't have its own API, but it does support Direct3D and OpenGL. Now, generally, this would have been, you would think that OpenGL games would do a lot better on it, since that was sort of the API for sort of professional things like CAD, things like that, which this card was a little bit more geared towards. But actually, I didn't know this. I actually found this out in my research, but there are different types of OpenGL, and there was a couple that were kind of more geared towards professional applications, and then there's an OpenGL that's kind of more geared towards games. And this card apparently is actually a little bit more geared towards the professional sort of OpenGL, so it actually doesn't do as well as you would think in OpenGL games. But we're gonna check that out. We'll see how well it does in certain games. Obviously, we're gonna check out GL Quake and things like that. So yeah, I'm just interested to see how well this card performs. It should be interesting. Hopefully, it'll be a little bit of fun, and let's just see how well we can do with this guy. I would also like to point out that this is actually, specifically, this is Creative's version of the card, the Game Blaster Extreme. That's with 2 X's, so this thing is pretty damn extreme. It is the CT6610, yes, from Creative. I tried to find official drivers for this card, because there are official drivers for this card, but For whatever reason, searching the depths of the internet, I could not find the official drivers for this card. I don't know why, so that's why I end up using the latest generic sort of reference drivers for the Permedia 2. Alright, so after getting a newer Dallas real-time clock battery, I don't know if they still make these, but there are some relatively newer ones. Usually they're marked Philippines on it, and I took a chance and I got a couple from Asia, and they finally got here, and I put it in, and it holds a charge, and it works, and the machine booted up just fine. So I think there was something wrong with my little modified Dallas real-time battery with the coin battery on it. That's just not, it's just not working, because it's such a hack job. I don't know why someone just doesn't modify a bunch of these and then sell them on eBay. It would be very convenient for people like myself that are like terrible at soldering and stuff, or just don't want to. I'm surprised there isn't a lot of modified Dallas real-time clock batteries on eBay with the little coin battery on them, or the holder. It's just, I don't know why I find that weird, because there's sort of a demand for those in the retro computing community. But anyways, so before I wiped the hard drive, I just wanted to show you guys, it did boot up to what the former owner had on here, and it's very typical of late 90s. I think it's Windows 98 Plus on here. Very slow to boot up, filled with just garbage. Looks like some kind of like astronomy theme. I think that's like planets, like a moon, and then the mouse cursor is like a dancer. It's like Fred Astaire or something, and then when it's doing something, it turns into like a little keyboard, piano keyboard. So yeah, not too much on here. Yeah, of course I looked around, and of course I went into Media Player and Real Player, and I looked at the history, and yeah, it's pretty obviously some pornography. It's gone. Either he removed it from the hard drive, he or she, I don't want to assume. Either they removed it from the hard drive, or it was like links from the internet, and I don't have this thing hooked up to the internet, so it just comes up not found and nothing. But some pretty, at least judging from the file names, some pretty racy stuff. But I question the legality in some or most states of some of the stuff, assuming from the titles. But yeah, interesting. So I'm just going to wipe this hard drive because it's just so... It works. Everything is working, but it's just so slow and cluttered. And of course, I want to just wipe the hard drive and put on just a fresh coat of paint. And I'm just going to install a fresh copy of 98 SE. So yeah, just... I think he must have had a prior, an ATI card, so we have the ATI stuff. There's also some sort of, hold on, it's just all kind of garbage. You know, the stuff most of us like clouded our computers with in the late 90s and just slowed things to a crawl. I don't know, he had some kind of like Norton hard drive manager. It's kind of cool. Part of me kind of wants to just keep the original setup, but it's just so slow and bogged down, and I don't want to deal with it, so I'm just going to do the smart thing and wipe it out. So two more points or things I would like to make clear real quick before we start the benchmarks. One, I forgot to mention I did upgrade the RAM in this thing from, I believe it was 32 or maybe even 16 megabytes, but I did upgrade it to 64 megabytes of EDO memory. That's been working just fine. The second thing is, this happens sometimes with these old computers, but this hard drive, well, more likely this operating system installation just doesn't want to go away or die. It's making it hard for me to reformat it. When I put in a DOS disk or any kind of disk, it just says, when booting, it just says non-operating system disk, or something like that, and it obviously is a system disk, and this is usually how I reformat drives. You know, I boot from the floppy and then reformat, but it's just refusing. It just says not a system disk. Now, doing it by a CD, I had a lot of trouble getting the CD drive working on this machine for whatever reason. It wouldn't work on the separate IDE channel. It worked for a minute as a slave, and then when I restarted, it was gone, and despite all my efforts, I couldn't get it to be recognized again. The only way it seems to be reliably recognized is when I use the IDE controller on the sound card, but for whatever reason, when I boot, it won't boot from the CD drive. It just skips it like it's not even there. This problem I can probably figure out, and if all else fails, I could always take the hard drive out and format it and put DOS on it or whatever in another machine and then reinstall it in this machine. But I'm not going to bother doing that. So the benchmarks you're going to see are not from a fresh install of Windows 98, but what I got in here. Now, I tried to get rid of all the junk I could. I got rid of like Norton antivirus and all those things that start up when you start the machine and load the OS, so I don't have anything running in the background. So I did try to slim down the OS. I also put back like the default wallpaper and everything. I got rid of all the themes and stuff. Now, how much this affects performance, I'm not sure. From a clouded or from a clogged up OS that's been used for a while as opposed to a new one, but in a way it does give a more authentic look at how this thing would perform. So I guess that's one plus. But like I said, how much it's going to affect performance, I'm not exactly sure, but full disclosure, this is not a fresh install of Windows 98. Mostly due to just my laziness, and I don't feel like fighting with the machine to reinstall the OS. So, but then again, the more I think about it, it does give a more authentic look at the actual performance of a machine someone's been using back in the late 90s, and they get a game and install it. So I guess that's a plus.
Just a quick look at the setup, and for reference, I'm running pretty much all these gameplays at 640 by 480 resolution at default settings. We're just going to look at CPU ID here real quick. I also want to point out, there it says, I think it says socket 5 up there, but it's not a socket 5 board. But I also want to point out I'm still, as always, messing around with my capture software, so I think I got the sound better, but unfortunately the image in the gameplay you're going to see is a little washed out, so you just have to take my word for it. It doesn't look that washed out in real life here. Yeah, 80 megahertz for the speed of the Permedia 2, and I guess that's 4 megabytes of onboard memory. It's not 8. So it must be 2 on board and then 2 on that little expansion card. So first off here, I just kind of wanted to run the Final Reality benchmark, which I also have fraps going, which I think gives it a teeny bit of a performance hit, but it shouldn't be too much. Some of these benchmarks, or not benchmarks, these are pretty much all just gameplay footage I'm doing here. Some of them don't have fraps running for whatever reason, or it didn't show up, and then some of them do, so, but it does, I think it still gives a good, visual impression of how well the game is running. Also, if you're curious, my benchmark score for Final Reality was about 1.4. Alright, so we're just going to take a quick look here at Ultimate Doom. This isn't really taking advantage of any 3D capabilities of the card, but I find some cards run Doom like really terribly, specifically the Rendition Virite GPU. Probably not pronouncing that correctly. It usually runs a lot of DOS games like Doom pretty terribly, so this is just a quick look at how this Permedia 2 chip plays Doom. After reading, after shooting this footage, I am aware there may be some ways to make Quake 2 play better on a machine like this. Apparently, it plays a little different on a Socket 7 motherboard, or certain Socket 7 motherboards, and Pentium 2 or 3 motherboards. And there's also command lines apparently you can add to the shortcut, and it should fix some issues and make it run a little bit better. But I really wasn't aware of these sort of fixes or patches until after I took this footage. So just keep that in mind, that there may be ways or like patches that will improve performance a little bit on systems like this.
Alright, enough playing around. Let's put the card into this machine. This is my Dell Optiplex. It's the GX110. This has a 1 gigahertz Pentium 3 in it, and coincidentally it only has PCI slots, so it works out. Not that you couldn't install the card on a machine with AGP or whatever, as long as it did have a PCI slot. But yeah, and this is kind of a businessy oriented sort of machine too. So yeah, 1 gigahertz Pentium 3. I'm not 100% sure that will eliminate the bottleneck CPU wise, but it should. I mean, this machine is much faster, much faster all the way around the board. So you know, I wasn't sure if I was going to do this at the beginning of the video, but hell, let's give it a shot. Let's put the card in this machine and see what it can do with a very fast Pentium 3.
So we'll start out here with 3D Mark 99, and right off the bat you can tell that there's something just not right with the textures and the image. Things are missing and incorrect. And I mean, this card had a lot of good features for 97, but by 99 it didn't have everything, so you have situations like this. The next part of this test is actually even worse as far as missing textures and just graphical glitches go. And in case you're wondering, I got a score of 405 marks. That's from taking the average of 3 runs. Take notice now, I'm not exactly sure what to call it. It's not really a shimmering, but there's kind of like black dots moving around. It's pretty prevalent if you look at the hand on the right lower side of the screen there. This didn't happen in GL Quake, and it also didn't happen in Quake 2 when I played it on the previous machine, the Socket 7 machine. So I'm not exactly sure what that is or what's causing it. I had that same issue in Quake 3 on this same machine. I don't know if there's a patch for it. So yeah, I thought for a minute maybe the card was going bad and the video memory on it was messing up, but it didn't do it in other games. So it looks like it's maybe a Quake thing, maybe on certain motherboards with this card. I don't know for sure. Maybe someone can enlighten me in the comments. Yeah, so Quake 3 actually ran kind of okay on this machine, at least for using a card from 1997, so in that way it's kind of impressive that it works. Obviously there is some issues, especially with the damage when you fire a gun like at the wall. It just has this, well, you can see it right there on the screen. So yeah, but I mean, it is playing. It has that same effect that we saw in Quake 2. You could see it right. I think it's all over, but you can see it most prevalent on lighter colors, like at the rocket launcher right now. But yeah, for what it is, it's actually is running better than I thought it would.
Taken the lead. You are tied for the lead.
So Unreal is a game I thought ran pretty good on this system and on this Permedia 2 card. Now, I did try running this game on the Socket 7 machine with the 166 megahertz, and even though it met all the minimum requirements or exceeded them in most cases, it just refused to run. Not that what the manufacturer posts as the minimum requirements means anything most of the time, but technically it did meet or exceed all the requirements, but it wouldn't run. It would lock up when I try to launch it. Now, I did get it to run windowed in Unreal safe mode, and it was pretty dang choppy, even in that safe mode being windowed.
Security breach detected.
chipset. Over.
Alright, let's move. The whole area is going to be slag in about 2 minutes.
They can't wait back, so be on time for once in your life.
Be nice.
So, the Permedia 2 card, what do I think? Well, I have to admit I was kind of impressed with the performance it was able to put out for a 1997 PCI card that's basically a workstation card. Now, a lot of things I read when I was kind of researching this card was that a lot of people loved this in their workstation because they could do their work, it gave pretty decent image quality, and maybe when the boss wasn't looking or when you were on your break, you could get in a game or two of Quake. So, in that sense, it does that. It is primarily a workstation card that can do some gaming. Would I recommend this card? No, because, like I just said a minute ago, it is primarily a workstation card that happens to be able to do some gaming. I mean, if you want to do some CAD maybe, or some spreadsheets or workstation stuff on a Windows 98 machine, and you have one of these sitting around, yeah, sure, but I definitely wouldn't recommend it for gaming. Even in 97, there were better gaming options. Yeah, I just think you're probably better off with any of the offerings from maybe ATI or NVIDIA at the time, like the Riva. You might even be better off with a Matrix card if image quality is really important to you. If you want to go a little bit later, like a G400 or something along those lines, might actually give you a better performance. I haven't directly compared this with any of the Matrix cards, but yeah, I would not recommend it for gaming, but it is surprisingly good at gaming for what it is. So if you guys like this video, have any comments, anything to add about this card, or anything I messed up on, let me know in the comments section. I'll be glad to hear from you guys and what you guys think about this card. If you like this kind of content, please subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Extreme